I've always been a vintage Hollywood buff, right? And I don't think they make them like they used to.
They want the money, but where's the money? Who has the money? How do we find the money? What happens when they get the money?
I counted, and I lost count at some point of time, but I got to around 7 or 8 major twists in the story. It's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie that was not made by Alfred Hitchcock, essentially.
Fine, it's hard enough to make a good mystery. It's hard enough to make a good spy movie. It's hard enough to make a good comedy. It's hard enough to make a good romance. But to make all of them in one movie is like 4 times harder.
If you want a primer on how to flirt, start with the first 5 minutes of this movie.
He says, "Okay, let me tell you my life story," and she says, "Fiction or non-fiction?"
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to episode 7 of the Lost in Thought podcast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people. So the interesting person I have on today is my friend Karthik Parthasarathy, or as I call him, KNP, which are his initials. Hi KNP, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Aditya. Or should I call you DL as I usually do?
Yeah, I can't believe you call me Aditya. You've literally never called me.
Yeah, I know. DL.
You can call me DL. You can call me DL. Maybe explain what DL is so that people know what you're talking about.
DL stands for Dark Lord, which is what a lot of us who had the pleasure of studying with this gentleman in B school know him as, mostly for his dark sense of humor, and also basically that's the dark sense of humor, I think.
Yeah, I actually I've forgotten how that nickname even originated. Anyway, I'll have to think about that. There was a specific origin story. There was some specific thing that I said in a context or did, but I can't. It's very alarming that I've forgotten it completely.
Well, now you get to make up your own origin story if you want to. So
yeah,
that's always a good thing.
I'll make up a different one each time someone asks me.
Inspired by the Joker.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, thank you for being here, and I'll just introduce you a little bit to our audience of approximately 6 people and growing. So KNP is a director of product at Tata Digital. His past experiences include stints at Cognizant, P&G, and Shell, so a lot of fancy companies that he's worked for. He still moonlights as a cartoonist, though. That's an interesting side to his personality. He's written and illustrated a graphic novel entitled. He's written and illustrated a graphic novel titled Dr. Endo's Gallery of Amusing Thoughts, and also a deck of illustrated playing cards titled Pack of Lies. And apart from this, as you can imagine, we also share a common interest in pop culture, quizzing, and puns, primarily bad puns, but occasionally also good ones. So is that a fair introduction? Is there anything I missed about you?
Absolutely perfect. And I don't think there is any such thing as a bad pun.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, great. And the movie that we're going to be talking about with Karthik today, with KNP today, is, should we say Charade or Charade?
Are we going to pronounce it Charade?
Yeah. So Charade is the American pronunciation, and I think Charade is the British one. Since it's an American movie, I think we'll go with Charade.
Agreed. Though Cary Grant is British, but yes, go on. And so is Audrey Hepburn.
That's true. But the director of this movie is
American.
American. So I think we'll go with the director.
Yeah, works for me.
Cool. So this is tell us why you thought of picking this movie.
So I've always been a vintage Hollywood buff, right? And I don't think they make them like they used to, the kind of story-focused, witty lines and the writing and all of those things. And I'm sure we'll get into all of this when we get into my 5 reasons. And when it comes to vintage Hollywood movies, I think there's 3 or 4 movies that are at the top of my list. There's Charade, there is Casablanca, there is Some Like It Hot, or The Apartment. And I picked Charade because I think it's one of those overlooked movies that very few people know about. And I absolutely loved it. First time I watched it was when I was like 12 years old. And as you can imagine, about 80% of it went over my head. None of the lines and everything, but I was there for the action. And later I revisited when I was like maybe 19 or 20. There was a media lab in my in the college where I studied, where you could crouch over these small screens with headphones and watch all these old movies. And that's when I watched it for the second time and absolutely loved it. And since then, I've been revisiting it maybe once every year or so, anytime I have a new girlfriend. And yeah, so I thought I would introduce Charade to your lovely audience.
Yeah. And I have to say that I'm also very much a fan of vintage Hollywood. Love the three posters behind you.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite movies there. Also, the movies that you mentioned, I think big fan of all of those. Somehow, this is one movie that had always eluded me. It's one of those things where, it's always been very close to the top of my list, but for some reason or the other, I keep putting off watching it. And so, weirdly enough, I had never watched this, even though it has always been amongst, at any given point of time, if you ask me the 10 movies that I want to see that I haven't seen yet, this would have been among those top 10 because I've been meaning to watch it for that long. But when you said you want to discuss this movie, I thought it's a perfect opportunity to watch it. And I watched it just last night.
Lovely.
And I love this movie. So, really excited to talk about it. And yeah, let's get into it actually. Let me actually first tell people a little bit about this movie before we start talking about it. So, this is a movie called Charade, like we said. It is a movie that came out in 1963, directed by this guy called Stanley Donen. It is a mix of genres, which we'll talk about in a bit, but it blends thriller, romance, comedy, the spy genre, amongst others. It stars Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. Here's a brief plot summary, although the plot twists and turns quite a bit. So let me just attempt to summarize the gist of it. So we start with this woman called Regina Lampert, who of course is played by Audrey Hepburn. We meet her when she's on holiday somewhere in the Alps, and we learn that she's married to a guy called Charles Lampert. He's like this rich guy, and we infer that it's kind of like a loveless marriage, and she doesn't really love him anymore. In fact, she mentions to this friend of hers that she's planning to divorce him as soon as she gets back to Paris. She meets this kind of charming guy called Peter Joshua, who's slightly older than her, played by Cary Grant. And there's sort of like this flirtatious vibe between them, and I think she implies that she's about to get divorced. So he says that, okay, I'll look you up and I'll call you up. But that's the end of it. They just have this 5 or 10 minute interaction when they meet on a holiday. After this, Regina gets back to Paris, and when she returns, she finds her apartment is completely stripped bare. There's nothing in it. It looks like it's been ransacked completely. And there's a police officer in the apartment, and he tells her that her husband, Charles, auctioned off his belongings and then was murdered shortly after that. And he was just murdered in a train and thrown off a train, which is what we actually see. The very first shot of the movie is a man being thrown off a train. So now we learn who this man is. Now, some suspicious people show up at his funeral, and she doesn't know what to make of these suspicious people. And then she's contacted by this man from the CIA called Bartholomew. I forgot his first name, but something. Sorry?
Hamilton Bartholomew.
Hamilton Bartholomew from the CIA. And he says, meet me at the American embassy. And then she meets him. And he tells her that her husband had been part of this group of 5 people who had been given a secret mission during the Second World War, where they had to infiltrate the French underground and give them 250,000 US dollars. So Charles and these 4 other people had been given 250K by the US government, and they had to deliver it to the French resistance. But these 5 people sort of double-crossed the US government and decided to keep the money for themselves. And then within that group of 5, apparently Charles double-crossed all of them and kept that money for himself. And now they've reached a point where Bartholomew says, you know what, the US government wants that money back, so where is it? And those 3 people that turned up at Charles's funeral were 3 of the people that he double-crossed, and they're also looking for the money as well. And there was a 4th person, and apparently that 4th person died in Germany itself during the Second World War. So this is what we learn at this point of time. And then when Regina's contemplating what to do with all of this, who should show up but Peter Joshua, played by Cary Grant, of course, where he says that, okay, I tried calling you, but I just couldn't get through, so I decided to turn up at the door. And then she confides in him that this is what's happened, and then he says, okay, I'm going to help you through the situation. A lot of other twists and turns ensue after that, which we'll talk about later, but this is the setup of the movie, and the rest of the movie is like who are these people? What I mean, they want the money, but where's the money? Who has the money? How do we find the money? What happens when they get the money? That's kind of the rest of the film. Is that a good summary? Did I leave anything important out?
No, I think it's a good summary, except the murders. You left out the murders.
Yeah, which we'll probably get into that when we start talking about. But yeah, there's a lot of murders that happen as we start to try and figure out which of these five people has the money and so on. But yeah, we get to that. Before we do, this is a spoilery discussion. So like if you are someone that cares about that, I would say watch this movie first and then come back to the rest of this conversation. The movie is available on Prime and Apple TV, but it's available on rent. So you'll have to pay like a small amount and rent the movie. It's also available for free on YouTube, Plex, and Tubi, but then you'll have to watch ads if you're watching it for free on any of these platforms.
That was quite annoying for me, actually. I rewatched it on YouTube recently, and every 5 minutes there was an ad, which was quite annoying. But
Okay. Yeah, I watched it on Prime. But yeah, so people, if you want to watch it, you know where to find it now. If you don't really care that much about spoilers, and I would say this movie, a lot of the charm is the plot, but there's a lot more to this movie to enjoy beyond the plot. So I think even if you know what this movie is about, you'll still enjoy the hell out of it. With that in mind, let's talk about the five reasons.
yeah, may I just say something here?
Yeah.
This is probably one of the few movies that you'll encounter that's actually in the public domain because the producers messed up the copyright notice when they made it. So if you wanted to splice scenes into this podcast, etc., if you wanted to edit stuff, and you could. The only thing that is still copyrighted is the music by Henry Mancini.
Yeah, that's a good piece of trivia, which usually would come later in the podcast. But
I'm sorry if I spoiled that.
no, that's good. But yeah, I think it's a great piece of trivia where the makers of this movie screwed up, where they forgot to include the word copyright in the notice that they issue at the start of the movie. So because of that, this movie instantly went into public domain as soon as it was released. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It is available in the public domain. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about the 5 reasons why you love Charade. The reason number 1 is the storytelling. So tell us about that.
So, as you mentioned, it spans multiple genres, right? I think that might have been quite common in Hollywood around those times, like where you had murder, mystery, thriller, the spy stuff going on, that there is, the romance angle. And this was also a screwball comedy at some level, right? Like there were great one-liners and witticisms being thrown around. It had everything. And to manage all of that so adroitly takes great skill, right? And also, I felt that there were so many twists. And I watched one of your earlier episodes. I think you were talking about Man from Earth, and where you were talking about how 2 twists is too many. And in this case, I counted, and I lost count at some point of time, but I got to around 7 or 8 major twists in the story. I don't know how you feel about that. If you felt were too many, and to be able to pull off this many twists and still maintain a light touch about it, I think was brilliant, right? Like I've not seen this kind of story. I mean, it's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie that was not made by Alfred Hitchcock, essentially. And that's not even me saying. That's what a lot of people have seen in it. That's the general reputation of this movie. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons I love this movie. Great storytelling without ruining it, without getting into unnecessary plot devices to maintain the twist. We can get more to how that's done.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of things that I want to talk about there in that one answer. But I'll talk about the twist since you brought that up, which is great because I think there's always an exception to every rule. I think Man from Earth, what I was referring to is if the film is building up towards a big twist at the end, and then they give a big twist at the end, and then soon after that they give you a second twist. That's what I find often doesn't work. I think what makes Charade different is the twists keep coming throughout the story. So like every 10 to 15 minutes, you're learning something new. And then you start to expect it because you feel like, okay, this is the kind of movie that's just playing with my expectations. And it just becomes a game where you're just waiting for the next revelation to come in. And like you said, all of the twists are really well paced throughout the film where they're revealed at just the right time.
I think it's more than just the right time, right? It's also how they handle so usually a movie like this, you have a point of view character, right? In this case, it's Reggie Lampert. That's Audrey Hepburn's character. And the point of view character essentially is at the same state of knowledge awareness as the audience, and they are learning about what is going on as the plot unfolds. And usually the audience learns with this character. But what happens sometimes, if you want to build up a little bit of suspense, is that the audience learns just a little bit before the POV character learns that, oh, there's something's off. You get a little bit of clue, and then that builds suspense in the audience mind, right? Now you're like wondering, oh no, how does she know this? How is she going to find out? When is she going to find out? What's she going to do? What's going to be the consequences of that? Those are the thoughts running through your head, right? And they did that very well in a couple of instances. But for most parts, she's as clueless as the audience, and the audience is as clueless at her. And they deploy this tool very, very adroitly to get this done. I don't know if you've seen this, these little clips of Hitchcock talking about suspense versus surprise. Are you aware of this? The bomb under the table.
You can elaborate on it, though.
So there's this video, I'm sure you can Google for it and you'll find it on YouTube, where Hitchcock essentially says, picture this, there are four people sitting around a table having a conversation, a very mundane, dull conversation. They're talking about baseball or whatever. And a bomb goes off, blows them all to smithereens. Now the audience is surprised, they're shocked, and that lasts for like 5 seconds and then they move on. But contrast this against same four people around the table talking baseball, talking something very boring. But you, the audience, is aware that there is a bomb under the table and that it's ticking down. There's a clock and you can see it ticking down to 5 minutes and it's going to explode. So for the next 5 minutes, you're riveted. You don't care about the baseball, or you're like, okay, what's going to happen? You know, you're anticipating, you're wondering. And that's a different emotional engagement that you're pulling off with just giving the audience some information that the characters don't have. Right? And I think that's essentially what Charade pulled off in in 2 or 3 occasions, where the audience finds out something, and then you are anxious for Reggie's character when she finds out.
Yeah, that's a good way to contrast the two. Do you think this movie has, I mean, it definitely has surprise. Does it also have suspense?
Plenty of it, I think so. Should we get into some spoilers here?
Go for it, yeah.
So I would consider this a spoiler because it happens pretty much within the first 30 minutes, right? So very early on, Peter Joshua, Cary Grant's character, clashes with one of the villains, one of the 3 men who come to the funeral. And the audience learns immediately, and then he chases him out of the room, follows him into a different room in the hotel. And then you realize that, wait a second, there's something's wrong here. He's actually in cahoots with these guys, right? And Reggie, of course, doesn't know it. And so that was the first time. So you're like, oh, wait a second, there's something's wrong here. He's not who he says he is. And then there are multiple such twists that take place through the story, which actually becomes a bit of a running gag. So we'll get into it eventually, I guess. And one other amazing thing I loved about this, about Cary Grant's portrayal of this character in this particular piece, is that, you know, till then he's been this affable, charming man about town, you know, this great flirtatious guy making all these wisecracks and stuff. And when he has to fight this villain, he's this heroic guy who goes in charging into the room unarmed and whatever, all of that. And then there is this instance when he leaves the room with his co-conspirators heading back to Reggie's room. He's walking down a small corridor and his face changes, right? The mask falls off. It's dark, you know, it's like he could be a villain. And you see that as the audience. And then he comes back, mask is back on, he's talking to Reggie again charming. He's like, okay, let me take care of you, kind of a thing. I thought that was just beautifully done.
Yeah. The entire film is beautifully done. I think I'm just going to try and remember all of the twists, and you'll need to help me out here because there are like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
Right. So first we start with Regina. Let's call her Reggie. So she learns all of this info. Now we start thinking that, okay, she's met Peter Joshua. Peter Joshua is a good guy who has her, like, who's kind of a friend or potential lover, but he's helping her out in the situation. Bartholomew is the CIA guy who's told her the government wants the money back. And then you have these 3 goons that are, what are the names again? Tex,
Herman Scobie, and Leopold Gideon.
Yeah, Tex, Scobie, and Gideon are the 3 goons that are who were potentially have hidden this money with her husband Charles. And there was a 5th guy, remember, who was with them, whose name is Dial, and he's dead apparently in Germany. So this is the first thing. Um, then, like you said, Peter Joshua has this altercation with one of these goons, and then you realize that he's in cahoots with them because he's just pretending to fight off this guy, and then he goes and like he has an argument with the remaining three, saying, "I have this under control. She trusts me now. I'm trying to get this information." But then one of those goons is kind of unhappy that this guy's butting in because he's like, if it's just between the three of us, we have like a bigger share. So that goon, I think it is Scobie.
Herman Scobie.
He calls up Reggie and rats on Cary Grant, saying that he's not really Peter Joshua. He's actually Dial, the fifth guy who was. She assumes that it's the fifth guy who was presumed dead. Then she calls Bartholomew and she
Hold
tells
on a sec. I just want to point out a little bit of storycraft here, right?
Yeah.
From the moment when you as the audience discover that Cary Grant isn't who he says he is, that Peter Joshua is a crook, to the point where Reggie finds out because of Herman's call, it's actually just for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, they don't let that suspense fester.
Yes.
Right, and this gets resolved into a sense of action. Now Reggie has to take action on this. So you're as the audience, right? Your point of view, your concern for the story now shifts. It was earlier like, oh my God, how bad is he? Is she going to find out? Now she's found out. What's she going to do? Yeah. So I think what the storytelling, the way it's handled, does very effectively is keep you as the audience also involved in this whole thing. You're part of the story now.
Yeah.
Very few movies I know actually can pull that off.
That's a great example of pulling off both surprise and suspense. Because in that one, you're right, it's a 3-minute sequence where, okay, surprise, Cary Grant is in league with the villains. That's a surprise. But then it's a pretty much unbroken shot from there to like he's conspired with them. Now he's walking back to the room where he's going to talk to Reggie. Now it's suspense for us because it's like, okay, now what's going to happen? Because we know that he's bad. She doesn't know that he's bad yet. He goes back to the room and this Scobie calls her up immediately saying that this guy is not who he says he is. Don't trust him. He's Dial. So up until that point, you're right. It's complete suspense. And then she calls Bartholomew at some point saying that this is what's happened. And then there's another shift in the dynamic where Bartholomew says, okay, now you spy on him because, we want to know what he's up to. So it again is like the pursuer becoming the pursuee and all of that. And she kind of like has this thing where he's following her. She shakes him off, then she follows him. And she calls him up in a payphone sort of thing. And she says, the game is up. I know your Dial. But then he says, okay, I'm not actually Carson Dial, who actually is dead, who died in Germany in the war and all of that. I'm his brother. So that's another now new twist in the thing where.
No, and the best part about this, right? Like, there are many best parts about this, but you're thinking, okay, wait, how is she going to handle this, right? Like she's got this information that he's an imposter, and she's got this dire warning from Bartholomew from the CIA saying that, okay, your life is in danger, all of this, you have to be very careful, all of that. What is she going to do? She confronts him with this. She's like, I know you're not Peter Joshua, I know you're Dial. And how insane is that? And we're talking about 50s or 60s. I mean, it's set in the 60s. And, your typical heroines aren't portrayed as these very strong, resourceful women. In most cases, this woman just goes outright, challenges a guy who could be a murderer, who's probably murdered her husband.
Yeah.
And she just goes outright and say, I know you're not who you say you are. And that took me by surprise. Yet another point in the storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah, and this movie keeps doing that, right? Like, I think most movies would just take that one moment and prolong it as much as possible. And often it feels illogical in movies when characters do that, right? Where they've learned something, but then they just pretend not to know it for a long time just to prolong the runtime of the movie and take that to a climax. But she's smart enough to kind of spy on this guy, evade him, follow him, get him to that payphone and then call him. 2, like you said, she's courageous enough to confront him because she's not afraid and she's actually wants to know what he's up to. But 3, she's like confronting him immediately where like, okay, now it's like, this is still only 20 minutes into the movie. So like what else is going to unfold now? Because in a regular movie, you'd probably expect that confrontation to happen later. Mm-hmm. But they've gotten the confrontation out of the way. So now it's time for the next twist and the next surprise. And that just keeps happening. So it is very well done from a storytelling standpoint. But yeah, that's not the end of the twist because he at this point he says, "Okay, I'm Carson Dyer's brother," and I forget the name that he gives her at this point of time. What is it?
Alexander.
Alexander Dyer, right? And the funny thing is, what becomes a recurring gag is when she first met him as Peter Joshua, she says, "Is there a Mrs. Joshua?" then she then she finds out he's Alexander Dyer, so she says, "Is there a Mrs. Dyer?" But that doesn't end there because later on in the film, she discovers that he's not Alexander Dial either, right? Because
No.
I think Bartholomew tells her that Dial never had a brother.
Yeah.
Again, she confronts him immediately, and then he's like, I'm a thief," and
Adam Canfield.
What's the name again?
Adam Canfield.
Adam Canfield. So is there a Mrs. Canfield again, right?
Yeah, and his response always says, yes, but we are divorced, kind of. And that's a running gag that goes right through the movie.
Yeah.
And also that sheds a certain light on Reggie's character, right? Because here's the thing. She was going to divorce her husband, her rich husband. She was this woman of leisure. And she's going to divorce this husband. And she's flirting with this guy. Husband's been murdered. She's flirting with this guy. And every time he says he's not, she finds out he's not who he is, she is still attracted to him.
Yeah.
Even if he's possibly a murderous crook, or if he is a thief, or a vengeful brother, doesn't matter. She's attracted to him, period. Nothing can kind of shake that attraction from her.
Yeah. And yet she doesn't play it as like, oh, I'm like this naive person who's just attracted to this man. There's a certain kind of ironic way in which he asks these questions. Oh, is there like a Mrs. Dial? Is there a Mrs. Canfield and whatever?
Right.
It's almost like she knows she's being silly, or it's illogical to be attracted to this man. So there's a sense of irony, there's a sense of like resignation with which he's asking these questions, where she's not coming across as frivolous or naive, which is it's also a good performance from Audrey Hepburn, I think, but also the writing of how this character is written.
Yeah.
Is that there's still another twist where he says like he's Adam Canfield, I was a thief. Eventually, the other twist is that Bartholomew turns out to not be a CIA guy himself, which is at the climax we learn that he Carson Dial?
He is Carson Dial.
Yeah. Wow. So the CIA guy who was giving all these instructions turns out to be Carson Dial. He never really died. He was in a German prisoner camp and all of that.
And of course, in between all these twists, the other three guys keep getting murdered one after another. So the pool of suspects rather keeps shrinking. Ultimately, it looks like, wait a second, Adam Canfield, or who he is, might actually be a murderous person.
Yeah.
Might be the murderer who's going after the money. And I think that's what happens, right? Like ultimately, it's just him left.
Yeah.
And Reggie is convinced that he's the murderer, and she's rushing to meet what's his name, Hamilton Bartholomew, and by this time she's found the money too, so she's going to turn over the money to him and for protection. And this is when there is this, it's not a Deus Ex Machina, but it's essentially this other third point of view that comes in, where she's trying to get in touch with him. She calls the phone operator, and the phone operator calls Hamilton Bartholomew, and some guy picks up, and it's not him. And this is again when the audience realizes that, wait a second, whom we knew as Hamilton Bartholomew is himself an imposter.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the climax of the movie where there's Cary Grant and Hamilton Bartholomew, played brilliantly by Walter Matthau, and Reggie in a kind of a three-way standoff. And yeah, the rest of it I'll leave for people to watch. And then there's still one more twist after this.
Yeah. And the last final twist is in the last seconds of the movie, where Cary Grant's character, he's not a thief, he's not Alexander Dial, he's not Peter Joshua. He turns out to be something. What is his name? Cruikshank.
Brian Cruikshank. He's a treasury agent who's out to get the money for the government.
Yeah, so he turns out to be the actual guy who's working for the government, and which Bartholomew was pretending to be is what Cary Grant actually is. And that we assume is what he really is, because that's where the movie ends, when he reveals that he was actually a good guy all along. But yeah, in case this is sounding confusing to people who are listening to this without having watched it,
you should watch the movie.
You should watch it, because since we're talking about all of the twists together, it sounds like it's a lot, but it's really beautifully like played out throughout the runtime where there's a great that balance of surprise and suspense and just finding out who are these people, where is the money, who could have the money, like does the person who has the money is he killing off the others, like what's happening, like it's all a great dynamic to try and figure out. But yeah, great storytelling. You mentioned the how adroitly it spans genres, so let's talk about that for a minute, right? Because it's really hard to do that, right? Because you can find it's hard enough to make a good mystery. It's hard enough to make a good spy movie. It's hard enough to make a good comedy. It's hard enough to make a good romance. But to make all of them in one movie is like 4 times harder. So, what's your observation of how they've done that?
I, I think it's a lot of different things that needed to come together to make it happen, right? One, you needed to have characters who are likable or hateable if they're the villains, etc. They're scary, etc. So you need a lot of misdirection that needs to happen for you to be able to pull off all these different things all at once. So you obviously cut scenes with a little bit of humor, with a little bit of action, and so on and so forth. And you want to have things happening when you don't expect them, right? I'm pretty sure the whole throwaway line witticism when you've got the villain hanging off the side of the building sort of a thing is been done to death. The whole James Bond kind of the final send-off line sort of a thing that everybody does it. And here, yeah, it happens here as well in places. But apart from that, I don't know. I've seen this movie like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 times. And it still surprises me like how they managed to pull this off.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't very coherent in that last part.
No, that's cool. No, I think, and also the actors really help because there's a sense of class that they carry where it unites all of those genres together, right? Because if you have somebody that is primarily funny, but then they can't really play charming or they can't really play menacing or intimidating, then one of those three is going to work, but the others aren't going to work, right? And vice versa, right? So, but I think both of these actors, as well as the supporting cast, I must say.
Supporting cast, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're to, and this kind of segues into the second point, my second point of why I like this movie, which is the cast, right?
Yeah.
The amazing cast. And so Cary Grant does charming and action fairly well. Audrey Hepburn is, well, Audrey Hepburn. What can you say? Like, she's a presence. She's elegant. She's beautiful. All of that. And this is Audrey Hepburn's movie. It's not a Cary Grant movie, really, because she's the POV character. You learn everything through her. She's got the best lines. Yeah. Cary Grant essentially plays the straight man, really, in this case, right? And then you come to the supporting cast. Walter Matthau as the initially avuncular CIA agent, caring, trusting, and all of that. He's got a few lines like, "Look, I'm just a civil servant," kind of a ethos. But when he has to, he can really ramp up the menace, right? And it's insane. Like, and this is like, oh, by the way, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we're recording on the 4th of May, so May the 4th, Star Wars Day, and all of that. Yeah. And it's like the twist, like when you find out who the Emperor really is in Star Wars, right? Like, what's his name? Ian McDiarmid playing the Senator Palpatine, who's this nice guy and all of that. And then he turns out to be, what's his name? The Emperor. Yeah. So it's that kind of a twist. Oh, this really nice uncle would probably give you a lollipop or something for a kid, and he's the big villain. And I don't know too many actors who could pull that off. Like Walter Matthau does that brilliantly. And when it comes to the other three, Leopold Gideon, I can't remember the names. Ned Glass, I think. He's this oldish-looking guy who's sneezing all the time. He's silly. He's silly, but everybody kind of refers to as he's the meanest of the lot. And you don't know how that works, but you reserve your sense of disbelief for that. And Herman Scobie's absolute menace, played by George Kennedy, who went on to win an Oscar for, I think, Cool Hand Luke, right? The one with Paul Newman in it. And this guy is just sheer menace, and he's got a hook for a hand, which is, I think, a great prop for menace if you want. Yeah. And then there's Tex Pantallo, played by James Coburn, who I think is a brilliant actor. I've seen him in The Great Escape, and a bunch of other movies. And he is this Texan cowboy with some great lines. I mean, amazing lines, right? Like, and he can do comedy and he can do menace. He can do both. So you have these characters that kind of actors who have been picked to play certain archetypes, if you will, and they pull it off brilliantly. And while they stick with that, I mean, you don't make George Kennedy try and say something comedic. Doesn't work. And they saw that limitation, and then they respected it.
Yeah. The cast is really great. I think apart from sort of bringing that balance of genres, I think they each bring that credibility to the fact that, like you said, right, this guy is sneezing, like the guy was sneezing, for example. And by the way, there's a great scene at the end where when that guy gets murdered, the sneeze segues into a scream very seamlessly.
Yeah.
But yeah, even though he's sneezing, because of the way the other actors are reacting to him and treating him, you still take him seriously because they signal that he's actually really tough and scary, and you don't want to get on his wrong side or whatever. Um, I just want to talk about I want to talk about Cary Grant a little bit here because couple of things, right? So one is you mentioned the Hitchcock thing when we were talking about the storytelling, but I think Cary Grant did like 4 movies with Alfred Hitchcock, so he's one of the quintessential Alfred Hitchcock leading men of the 40s and 50s, and that's probably another reason why this movie. One of the reasons why this movie seems Hitchcockian is also because it has Cary Grant in this kind of a role, and I think Hitchcock was one of the first directors to kind of tap into the darker side of Cary Grant's personality because I think it was Notorious. If you've seen that one,
Was Notorious Cary Grant or was it Gregory Peck?
No, I think it was Cary Grant.
Okay, all right, I'll take
and Suspicion also, especially Suspicion, where that's kind of like similar to Rebecca, right? Suspicion, where he's marrying a rich woman, where he's like this con man kind of figure, and his wife is rich, and I think throughout the movie you're trying to figure out whether he's actually in love with her or whether he's sort of planning to kill her off and like get her money. And the original novel upon which Suspicion is based had an ending, I think, where like, sorry, I don't know whether I'm spoiling Succession.
No, don't worry about it. I think I've seen
and
them
the
all.
audience. But yeah, in the original novel, it was clearer that the guy is evil and he's planning to kill his wife. But because this was still the studio era where the studio didn't want Cary Grant to be playing a guy like that, so I think Alfred Hitchcock was forced to go with a more ambiguous tone. But my main point is that Alfred Hitchcock was the first guy to, in Notorious and Suspicion, kind of cast Cary Grant as this slightly darker character who's has these villainous aspects to him.
Right.
And that's also tapped into here in this. Of course, in the end, you learn that he's been a good guy, quote unquote, all along. But there are moments when he seems villainous and he seems like he's not a good guy. And that's also another reason for me why this movie seems so Hitchcockian, is the dark Cary Grant persona in this film.
That's a very interesting observation. I hadn't thought of that really, that aspect of the Hitchcock connect. But you're right. That definitely contributes to the atmosphere of it.
Yeah. And even though, so how do you feel about the Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn? Because I was looking this up, and apparently Cary Grant was 59 years old when this movie was made, and Audrey Hepburn was 33. So there's a 26-year age gap between them. He does look significantly older than her, but so a good piece of trivia that I read was apparently he himself was uncomfortable with this dynamic because he said, I'm too old to play this character, or she's too young to play the other character. But the way that they decide to address that is that, Stanley Donen added a piece of dialogue where he actually says, I'm an old man, or I forget the exact piece of writing, but I remember it. He comments on his age in some way. But the interesting thing is that throughout the film, if you notice, Regina is portrayed as the primary pursuer, right? So that's to make it seem less creepy or to make it seem more natural, where she's actually attracted to him. But it doesn't seem as off. Like it does feel like they could be a plausible couple.
I think it's done fairly subtly, right? I mean, I know he was 59 or whatever. these days you find what actors in their 60s going with actresses in their 20s and 30s, right? I mean, paired with them in these movies and whatever. So I don't think that was ever something that the audience would have minded. But yeah, it was something that he was conscious about. But I also read that his previous movie, the age difference between Cary Grant and the female lead was like 25. So it wasn't just the absolute difference, but I think at 59 he was feeling old. He was
Yeah.
he was feeling his age at that time possibly. But yeah, I think the chemistry is great between them. I did not find it off. At places I felt Audrey Hepburn's performance was wooden, but I don't think that's a big deal either. I mean, she uh, she pulls off a lot of other impressive things in this movie. So once in a while, if she's hamming it or wouldn't, it doesn't really matter too much to me.
Yeah, I also felt like some of her reactions was slightly like overdone, like where, especially when she's surprised or she's like, she has this very cartoonish gasp face where it's like the
Yeah.
eyes go wide and the mouth opens up. But yeah, I mean it's Audrey Hepburn, so I think she just the grace and the elegance and the beauty that she has allows her to kind of pull that off, I think. And like you said, she does really well in a lot of the other parts of the movie, where she can portray innocence as well as competence at the same time.
I
Um,
think Audrey Hepburn plays Audrey Hepburn in pretty much every movie she's in.
yeah, that's true.
And I guess it's the skill of the casting director to say that, okay, that Audrey Hepburn character fits into this movie that they're trying to make. And in the case of Charade, I think it does fairly well.
Yeah. Apparently, I mean, so this movie came out at Christmas in 1963, and Cary Grant, despite his reservations while signing on for this, like he said that all I want for Christmas is another movie with Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah. I don't think he got it, did he?
I don't think so. But before we move on from this point, since we're still on this age bit, a funny thing that I read also while I was reading up about this film, remember so there's a scene in the movie where he decides to shower, right? And he cheekily keeps the door open, and she's like, close the door, but he's like, no, I'm going to shower in front of you. So he goes into the bathroom and showers, but then he ends up showering with his suit on. And the way that came about is that originally the script was for him to shower, like to take off his shirt and stuff and shower. But again, because Cary Grant is aging and he's like almost 60, he was uncomfortable taking off his clothes for that scene.
Right.
And they just discussed it and they thought it'd actually be funnier as a scene if he just had a bath with his suit on. So that's how that came about.
Yeah. And what I loved about that scene, right, is that it was this bit of silliness in the middle of all of this that's going on. There's evil henchmen running around threatening Audrey Hepburn. There's people getting beaten up, people getting murdered, and there's just this touch of silly. The thing is, it's not funny, right? When I saw it, I was like, okay, this is not funny. Why is this here?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not like whatever they're saying is particularly amusing or entertaining or whatever. But it's a moment of silliness between these two characters, and I think that did a lot. And I think I've noticed that in some movies, it works to kind of interrupt the narrative, to kind of maybe give the audience a break, and then continue again. I don't know if that was the thought behind the writer's minds, but I appreciated it.
Yeah, same here. Okay, so reason number 2 why you like this movie was the cast. I think we've spoken about the cast. Before we go on to the third reason, since you mentioned we talked about Hitchcock a few times, and you also said at the start that this is the best Hitchcock movie that Hitchcock didn't make. Are there other? So I can think of a few other films in that category as well. So I just thought I'd mention them. I don't know, like, are there any movies in that category that you'd like to talk about?
Nothing really comes to mind. I'm sure there are some, but I've not given it much thought myself. So yeah, if you have some names, then I would love to discuss them with you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what came to my mind, right? And I think I'll recommend all of these movies to the audience as well. So one is a couple of movies made by this guy, this French director, Henri Georges Clouzot. I think in the 50s, he made these two movies back to back, which are very Hitchcockian. At least these are the two movies that I've seen. There could be more that he made. One is The Wages of Fear, and the second is Diabolique. Have you
Yes,
seen
I
it?
was just thinking of Diabolique just now.
Yeah.
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 Which was remade with Sharon Stone in it, I think. In
Oh,
the
was it? I didn't
90s,
know
huh?
that.
Yeah.
Okay, it makes yeah, that's a very. I mean, Sharon Stone fits that movie. So Wages of Fear is this movie where, excuse me, Wages of Fear is this movie where two people are driving a truck filled with nitroglycerin through this through the countryside, and they're truck drivers, and they have to deliver nitroglycerin from point A to point B, and it's very very dangerous, right? Nitroglycerin, because the slightest uh,
Vibration could set it off.
slightest disturbance of vibration would set it off. So it's a very suspense filled movie where they have to like navigate this difficult landscape where there are obviously like bumps and stuff, and like as you can imagine, things start going wrong on that journey. But how do they get that nitroglycerin from point A to point B? It's a great, highly recommend that movie for anyone. And then Diabolique is much more Hitchcockian, and it's a suspense movie where a woman and or two women conspire to kill a man, and then the body vanishes, and it's kind of like a thriller slash horror where it's like, what happened to the body? Did he really die? Is he back from the dead haunting them? Like, it's a really another great movie. So these two that come to mind. I think in India there's a Sriram Raghavan. In fact, the previous episode, which will have come out by the time this episode is released, is about Andhadhun, directed by Sriram Raghavan. And that's also very Hitchcockian. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not. No.
Okay, so I'd recommend Andhadhun,
Oh,
Johnny
wait,
Gat-
Andhadhun. Yes, I have seen it.
the blind Ayushmann Khurrana plays that blind, quote unquote, blind guy.
Mhm.
Uh, and there are two other movies by him. One is Johnny Gaddar and one is Merry Christmas. Both also Hitchcockian. So also, like, I think he's very much a sort of Hitchcock fan, and you can see that in some of these movies that he makes. And I thought of another one. Oh yeah, have you seen Brian De Palma's Blowout?
Blew out. No, I have not.
With John Travolta as a photographer. Photographer? No, he's a
You know, there
sound.
was a no. I think there was this movie called Blow Up, which Antonio Mastroianni.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, that's the one with the photographer where he blows up a photo and finds a body in the photo. Is that
You're
the-
right. So you're right. I confused the two. So that one is what did you say that was? Blow out or blow
That was
up?
blow. That was Blow Up, I think.
Yeah, you're right. That's blow up. Okay, so that's blow up, where he's a photographer and he witnesses a murder.
Right.
So I think Brian De Palma made a remake of that called Blow Out,
Okay.
where John Travolta plays a sound engineer. He's not a photographer. And the premise is the same. Like, he's out recording some sounds, and yes, it's called Blow Out because he witnesses a tire blowing out. Like a car is passing by on a bridge and the tire is blown out, and the car sort of flips into the river and somebody dies. But then on his recording, he uncovers evidence that it might have been a murder and not like an accident.
Interesting.
Really, that's like, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. So I would highly recommend that one as well.
I shall add it to my list. Have you seen The Conversation? I know this is moving away from Charade, but
Yeah, the conversation. Yeah,
yeah,
of
that's
course.
what happens whenever we talk. So
Gene Hackman, right?
Gene Hackman, yeah, that's the one where he's essentially a surveillance specialist and he records something which turns out to be a bigger conspiracy and he's
Yeah.
trying to prove it. And yeah, another great movie.
Awesome.
And
So
also very Hitchcockian that way. Somewhat
also
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll include the names of all of these movies in the YouTube notes for people who want to check them out. But yeah, that's great. Like, I'm feeling the urge to watch all of these movies again now. But let's stick to Charade. Okay, so reason number 3 that you like this movie or love this movie is the dialogue. So let's talk about the dialogue.
This movie is full of just great one-liners, right? Right from the start. I mean, like, if you want a primer on how to flirt, start with the first 5 minutes of this movie. The conversation between Reggie Lampert and Peter Joshua in the beginning, and neither of them is expressing anything, but they are saying everything, right? And as it progresses, like, I don't know. There is this one one line which I'm not going to give away the ultimate line of the movie, which is the final line in the film, which is brilliant. But apart from that, there is this one scene where essentially Cary Grant's been fighting with Herman Scobie. His back is scarred and cut, and his coat is ripped to shreds. And he comes back to the hotel, and Reggie sees him, and she, of course, is going to nurse him back and whatever, right? And that entire interaction, she's like, "Oh, I have a medicine that's going to sting a lot," and he's like, "Yeah, you seem like the kind of person who would." And then she patches him up, and she's like, "Oh, you can't lie on your back, but then you can lie from any position, can't you?" Or
Yeah.
something. And I thought that is just such a brilliant line. And
Yeah.
there's just more and more of those. And what I love is that the lines aren't just given to Audrey Hepburn or to Cary Grant. In fact, Cary Grant, as I said, more or less plays a straight man. He gets very few lines himself. But they're also distributed to the supporting cast, like Tex, played by James Coburn, gets a couple of really brilliant lines. Like he's contemptuously abusing Cary Grant for what they both think is a scene where they've both been fooled by Reggie's character that she's got the money and she's running away. These two are facing each other, and James Coburn starts insulting Cary Grant. And all these brilliant lines. Oh, she battered her eyelids, and you fell for it like an egg from a tall chicken. And I was like, oh, what a line!
Yeah. I mean, there's so many lines that I've forgotten, like a few of them, like the egg from a tall chicken. I remembered just now.
Oh, my mother didn't raise any stupid children. That was another brilliant line.
So I think this could actually be my favorite aspect of this movie because there's so many great lines in this movie. Um, and I actually was noting them down on my phone, as they were coming, but then I almost couldn't keep up with them. So I was looking at my notes and I've listed out 25 lines that I thought were great in the movie. I'm not going to say them out loud now, but yeah, a lot of the ones that you mentioned were really funny. And do you want to give away the last line because it's a spoiler discussion? So why don't you tell people?
Yeah, sure, why not? So Reggie's just discovered that this man who has gone through multiple identities, first starting with Peter Joshua, then Alex Dial, then Adam Canfield, and now Brian Cruikshank. And he essentially proposes marriage to her at this point. And so she kisses him and she goes, Peter, Alex, whatever you are, I hope we have lots of boys and we can name them all after you.
Yeah, and that's the final line of the movie.
Yeah.
One of the great closing lines, I have to say.
It is, yeah, absolutely one of the top three closing lines for me.
Another thing that I came across is that Stanley Donen apparently was really unhappy. The one thing that he regrets about this movie is that when that line starts, right, the music swells.
Yep.
So he feels like the music kind of drowned out what was the best line of the movie. But I think you can catch it, like you hear it.
You can make it out. I don't know if the prints that we have now have been mastered or touched up or something, but you can make it out. And I never had trouble hearing that line. Though I did, I mean, the first time I watched it, like I said, I was 12 years old. I wasn't in it for the lines and they all went over my head. But yeah. But you can make out the lines in the prints that I've seen on Amazon as well as on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll just mention a few other lines that I really loved. So one is at the funeral when this who's the sneezy guy again? The
Gideon.
Gideon. So Gideon goes up to the body of Charles at the very beginning when the funeral is happening, and obviously he sneezes there as well. And Audrey Hepburn is sitting with her friend, and the friend, no, I think, yeah, Regina whispers to her friend saying, "I think he knew Charles well," and the friend says, "Why?" Because he's allergic to him. Okay,
Yeah.
that's one. Then when she goes to the American embassy, there's two people getting out of a lift as she's getting in, and she overhears them saying that I won X so and so. He implies that he beat his boss at poker.
Yeah, I bluffed him with a pair of twos or something like that.
Yeah, I bluffed him with a pair of twos or something, and he says, that really scares me. And the other guy says, why? Because he said, if I can do that, imagine what the Russians are doing to him.
So, there's a bit of trivia on that scene, right?
Yeah.
That's a cameo by the writer Peter Stone.
Oh,
Yeah, and in fact, there were two writers. I think one guy appeared as that character, the other guy supplied the voice.
I did
So
not know.
both of them, so again, a Hitchcockian touch right there.
That's a great one. Also, I forgot to mention this book. There was a book upon which this movie is, based on which this movie is adapted. I think it was called The Unsuspecting Wife initially, and they changed that to Charade.
So actually, and I'm pretty sure we are probably reading from the same source, which is likely Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So these guys wrote the script, right? And they tried to shop it around, and there were no takers. And then they wrote the book, and it got serialized in one of those magazines or something like that. And with that sort of backing it up, they went back trying to sell the script and changed the name to Charade. And now they were takers in Hollywood, and then that's how it got made, got picked up.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
book actually came after the script.
I don't think I knew that one. Okay, so that was another great line. Now, there's another one where she smokes a cigarette and she says, this is like drinking coffee through a whale.
Yeah, so she doesn't like the filter. That's another. I mean, that whole dialogue, right? So she's sitting in a cafe having a clandestine meeting with Hamilton Bartholomew, the supposed CIA guy, and she's bumming cigarettes from him. So she takes a cigarette from him. She doesn't like the filter. She tears it off, and then
Yeah.
she's smoking it. And then she takes another filter and tears it off. And he's like, "Do you know how much these things cost?" And again, and they're having a very serious conversation about the heist that led to this moment and how she's in danger and all of that. And this guy pauses and says, "Gee," and as a reform smoker myself, I kind of relate. You know, another movie that really reminds me of Midnight Run. Have you seen this? In fact, if it hadn't been this movie, that's another movie I'd love to talk to you about. It's a buddy road movie with Robert De Niro and one of the Brolins. I can't remember. Not Josh Brolin. So basically, Robert De
Jim
Niro is a
Brolin.
bounty hunter. Sorry?
Jim Brolin is.
No, I can't remember. I think
Okay.
it's a Brolin. I'm not sure. So Robert De Niro is a bounty hunter who has to get this particular guy who's going to be ratting on the mob to, I think, LA or something within 24 hours. And obviously, that guy wants to do it, so he's like throwing up hurdles along the way, and they're being pursued by other bounty hunters as well as the mob. In this case, the mob boss, very ably played by Dennis Farina, who is hilarious. And another great movie. You should add that to your list. And so there again is a scene of this kind where, there's a play around cigarettes that comes into play. Yeah.
I will watch this movie. I haven't seen it. That was another great line. And yeah, the other one was when at one of the points when I was going to say George Clooney for some reason. I meant Cary Grant, but he does look
You
a
know
little
what?
like George Clooney.
If you were to remake this movie today, I think George Clooney would has that thing to fill in for Cary Grant. I think,
Yeah,
how to
he
play that
does. Yeah, he does kind of look like him. And the guy who plays Scobie looks like Hans Zimmer, weirdly. Don't you think so?
role. Yeah, George Kennedy.
George Kennedy, yes. Sorry, yeah. So at one of the points when Cary Grant is revealing one of his identities to Reggie, he says, "Okay, let me tell you my life story," and she says, "Fiction or non-fiction?" So good, so good.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
And there's another killer line right before the last line when he says that my name is Brian Cruikshank, and she says, "Serves me right if I get stuck with that one." Oh man, such good dialogue.
You know, we briefly touched on remakes, right? Or
Yeah.
and this movie has been remade a fair bunch of times in multiple languages, and one of them was this remake called "The Truth About Charlie," with Mark Wahlberg playing Cary Grant's role and Thandie Way Newton,
Oh
Thandie
man,
Newton as she was called, but now Thandie Way Newton, playing the role of Reggie Lampert. And do you know who directed this?
no.
This was Jonathan Demme, who made movies like
Wow.
Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And this is so badly panned. It's like a 4.6 or 4.7 on IMDb.
Damn.
Right? He wanted to remake Charade, and but he took a different direction. He wanted to pay a tribute to French New Wave movies. There's a movie called, I think, Kill the Piano Player or something like that, which is again a connection back to Andhadhun if you want.
Yes.
Right? And yeah, so critically panned. And you know who plays Hector Bartholomew, Carson Dyle? Take a guess. I mean, if you're thinking of recasting this movie, who do you think?
In,
Sorry,
in that movie you're talking about, the one.
in the remake, who played this character? Who played
Don't tell
Walter
me
Matthau's
don't tell me
character?
it's Anthony Hopkins.
No,
Who is it?
Tim Robbins.
What?
Can you see it? I can't. I can't see it.
I can't see any of this. I can't see. First of all, you lost me at Mark Wahlberg playing the Cary Grant role. That he sounds like he would be at the bottom of my list. Like, did he start from the bottom? Even Thandie Newton has already happened. I don't get it at all.
Stanley Newton's all right. I mean, like, I
Which
like.
is better than Mark Wahlberg as Cary Grant's character for sure.
If you were to make it today, I think the only person who can think of probably filling in Audrey Hepburn's shoes is Anne Hathaway, maybe. I think there is, I don't know, there's a physical
I see that.
resemblance of some kind.
I also see, do you know Margaret Qualley? I kind of see her as a.
Yes, but I don't know if she's got the same kind of presence. She's pretty and can act for sure, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only other name that sprung to mind because I've seen her. Have you seen The Substance, by the way?
I have, based on your recommendation.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. But yeah, I've seen her in a few things, and she's been really good. So I feel like she has the same balance of she can play a really innocent person that you are rooting for, but also she can play a really like badass person that is in charge of things.
Right.
Yeah.
But who I would cast for Carson Dyle, the only character I can think of who can do that whole friendly uncle thing, probably is Tom Hanks, right?
For which one?
For Carson Dyle. For
you mean Bartholomew?
Yeah, Hector Bartholomew, Carson Dyle, the main villain.
Yeah. I mean, Tom Hanks would be great because you immediately trust Tom Hanks, so you wouldn't figure that he's going to be like the actual bad guy in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to see George Clooney, Anne Hathaway, and Tom Hanks. That would be a great, great recasting for this movie.
Tex would be, I don't know. Actually, any number of people could play Tex, I guess.
Yeah. We're getting sidetracked now, but this is a great.
Back to what you wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Let's leave it at George Clooney, Anne Hathaway, and Tom Hanks. But okay, last question: who would direct the remake?
Who would? Oh, very good question. I
want to say Steven Soderbergh, maybe, or
maybe, yeah. Or wait, who did Chicago?
Chicago the musical.
The musical, yeah.
Rob Marshall or somebody like that. Yeah.
So the thing is, Stanley Donen, right?
Yeah.
Got his start as a dancer and a choreographer. He worked a lot with Gene Kelly. In fact, Gene Kelly roped him in as a director because he said he's the only guy who can tell the cameraman how to make dancing look good. And this guy did a lot of innovation on the musical front. In fact, he's the king of musicals.
Wasn't he the director of Singing in the Rain also?
Singing in the Rain, On the Town, Anchors Away, all of those movies, right? Before him, right, your big musical number was a set piece shot on a stage. And it was a dance number that you shot. This guy said, we will adapt dancing for film. This is musicals for film rather than musicals on film. Right? And so I think you'd want someone with the similar kind of sensibility if you wanted to remake Charade.
That is a very interesting point. In fact, should we segue to your point number 4, which is the music, since we're on the topic of musicals? So,
yeah, why not? Henry Mancini's theme for Charade, which used to be one of the songs on my set list when I was studying for exams late at night. Yeah, and I don't really have very much to say apart from it's just a very nice sounding song. And they use it in multiple places in the score. Like there is one scene where they've added some words to it, and it sounds pretty bad actually. You know, the scene where they're on the Seine and they're shining lights on the lovers on the boat. It seems like a very weird thing to do. So for people who don't know what I'm talking about, Audrey and Cary Grant are having dinner on this boat that's going down the River Seine, and it's night and it's dark. And apparently, part of the attraction is that they take a spotlight and shine it on the banks on couples who are essentially kissing in the dark.
Yeah.
And the couples look at the camera and then look away and go back to kissing their paramour as they were. I'm like, geez, if I was one of those people on the bank, I'd probably throw stones at the damn boat. I don't know. And but then there are other sections where they use parts of the same theme, you know, like maybe just the percussion break or something, and that's used to build up suspense during chase sequences and things like that. So I thought it was quite well used, and it just ties everything together and doesn't lose focus.
Yeah. Do you think there's some link? Because I just, the reason I said let's segue into this point is because I found it very interesting that you said his experience as a director of musicals is probably what the, or the sensibility that he developed as a director of musicals makes him suitable for this movie. What, like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think that was more about movement, right? Rather than the music part of it. Like, how do you direct movement? How how do you position the camera to kind of keep it out of the way of the action? And I think there didn't seem to be any jarring cuts of any kind, right?
Yeah.
Like things were smooth. You got into the story and you weren't distracted out of the story by something that is happening, right? By it didn't feel like the director was making some kind of a choice with the camera work or anything that made you feel conscious about it. You just felt in the room, if you will.
Yeah. But also, I would say this movie, I mean, I do love the music, like that you mentioned. Um, I do think the point on movement is interesting. And what, because, and I mean, another thing that I noticed in the movie is it is very beautifully staged. I mean, there are some shots that are just really good to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering whether that experience of, again, somebody who has experience with stage or musicals or adapting things to
Quite
camera,
possible,
but it's very well
especially
composed. Yeah.
especially in the finale. When they are when she's running towards those towards Hamilton Bathroom, the colonnade, the pillars, and all of that. That whole square, how it's pictured. By
That
the way, I
change.
did not like the climax of this movie.
Oh,
Now,
no.
yeah, the whole thing in the theater. Again, there is a lot of suspense that's being built up in the end. Now you know who all the players are, you know who the bad guy is, and all of that. And should I give it away?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
So Reggie runs away from both Carson Dial, who is Walter Matthau, the CIA guy, and from Cary Grant's character because she doesn't know who to trust. And she goes and hides in a theater. And now both of these guys have made their way into the theater, except Cary Grant is on the stage. Audrey Hepburn is hiding in this little prompt box. So if people don't know what that is kind of this sunken room under the stage, but with a slight opening on top from where people could prompt the actors when they forget their lines. And she's hiding in that area. And Cary Grant is somewhere underground under the stage trying to find his way to her, and he's not able to. And on top, Walter Matthau's character is getting closer and closer to finding her. In fact, he knows she's there. He's pulled out his gun. He's about to kill her. And Cary Grant from below is looking at the trap doors under the stage. And he manages to pull the right one. And this guy falls through the trap to his death below, which looked extremely comical because he lands on his feet and then bounces off.
Yeah.
I thought that's just weird. Like, it felt very anticlimactic to me. And in all of this, of course, we've not really talked about how exactly the money was found and where it was. Should we save that
Yes.
for the audience?
Yeah, I mean,
For
we
your
can.
audience?
Let's talk about this a little bit more because I like the ending, and yeah, maybe I feel like showing him fall on his feet was a little silly, but I like the whole visual of um, it was a very unique sort of way for a villain to meet their end, right? Where you sort of see the underside of the stage. Cary Grant has this moment where he figures out what the trapdoors are for because there's a
Right.
bunch of levers with lettering and numbers on them. And he looks up, he can see the bottom of the stage and he can see the same letters and numbers there. So he has this aha moment where he says, okay, that's the trapdoor and these are the levers. And then it's a nice, again, suspense where he's waiting for the guy's footsteps to come to the exact right trapdoor. And then he pulls the lever. So I found that visual very unique.
I found it visually unique, but implausible, right? Like, how do you make out from the sound of his footsteps which trapdoor he's on? In fact, in his shoes, I'd have just put all the trapdoors open, like open the whole stage. He's bound to fall through one of them.
That is true. But then he starts opening them, and that guy can run off the stage. I guess that was his reasoning.
Possible. You know what this reminded me of? Indiana Jones, right? And what was that? Was it the Raiders of the Lost Ark? Yeah, it was the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Have you seen that?
Yeah, the first
Where
one.
he's got to go through these 3 challenges, and one of them is that he has to walk in the name of the Lord, and he has to step on the right tiles that spells out Jehovah, and he steps on the J, but the J is wrong because back then it would have been spelled with an I, and he falls through, but he manages to hang on, and then he gets back up, and then remembers, and then he goes the right way. But then the question is, he hung on to a particular rock which had a different letter on it. How come that rock didn't fall? Because that wasn't one of the letters in the name of Jehovah. So
Yeah.
little niggles, little faults that you find in picky thingies.
I mean, I'm not too fussed about how plausible a lot of this is, but I did find that scene visually compelling. And going back to what I was saying earlier, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that shows me that Stanley Donen has a great eye for a visual, right? So not just that, but also, for example, even that shot of the cruise ship on the water before they dine on it, it just looks so beautiful and cinematic. The climax where we talk about this, they're going to a stamp market, right? They're meeting outside a stamp market or something, and then there's like these pigeons taking off in the background. And that shot is just framed so beautifully where Cary Grant is, I think, in the center, and there's pigeons taking off over his shoulder. I love the not the dance, the fight scene on the rooftop. Again, it's kind of looks fake, but maybe the experience of choreographing like dance in a musical translated into how that scene was shot.
Right. You know what? That fight felt clumsy.
Yeah.
Right. It lacked polish, and I imagine there's something real about it, right? Because if regular people fight,
it would look like that.
Yeah, it would be clumsy, right? Like you're pushing, you're shoving. It's not going to be choreographed kung fu kind of a thing. You're not ducking out of each other's way. So I quite like that fight.
Yeah, I liked it too, and I like the one is the clumsiness of it, but two is the juxtaposition of it against that really scenic nighttime rooftop Paris view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it reminded me of Skyfall. I don't know whether you've seen Skyfall. There's a scene there where Daniel Craig has like this fight on some rooftop. I forget the location and all now. But similarly, it's like a silhouette of them fighting against like this multicolored skyscraper in the background, changing lights in the background. I'm not describing it very well, but I just remember the visual of that very vividly, and I'm wondering whether that was inspired by this in any way. Because this also is kind of like a two men in the shadows fighting against like a neon lights on the rooftop. There are also some other Bond like touches, like the claw on the hand of Gideon and all that, right? Even the visual of before that last chase scene where they're running after each other. There's a scene where Audrey Hepburn is running down the stairs of the apartment building. Cary Grant is coming up in a lift. Then he realizes that she's going up, so he starts moving the lift down. Even that's just the way that is shot, where she's running down the stairs and then he's going down in the lift. It just looks really good, that image. But yeah, I love the music, love the visuals. Let's talk about the last reason why you like this movie, the fashion. Is that
This is not really one of my reasons. I'm fairly oblivious to this. but I wanted to complete the 5, and I asked my girlfriend, and she said, "Oh, you have to talk about the fashion." And I was like, "Okay, all right." And since she was kind of the reason that I saw it most recently, and it was top of mind when you invited me to come on the podcast, so I said, "Okay, absolutely, the fashion." So, so Cary Grant is, of course, considered one of the best dressed people in Hollywood all the time. But more on Audrey Hepburn, who's also one of the best dressed people in Hollywood. Uh, and for, I think, a large part of her career, she was exclusively dressed by Givenchy, Hubert de Givenchy, whoever. I always thought it was Givenchy or something, but it's one of those names that you don't know how to pronounce until someone corrects you. And in this case, it was my girlfriend who corrected me too. So yeah, similar to words like, I guess, lingerie. Oh, I got one for you.
Okay.
When a classy lady decides to go commando.
I'm afraid that we'll have to edit out this answer, but I'm
No,
repeat.
lingerie.
Uh,
Hey, we didn't mention we're into bad puns, so we have to
Yeah.
give folks a flavor of that, right?
Okay. I mean, I have literally nothing to add about the fashion. I don't know. I am not an authority on that whatsoever.
Me neither. But she looked good.
She did look good, yeah. Okay, great. So that's about everything on Charade. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch upon?
No, not really. It did pique my interest in stamp collecting at that point of time, but then I realized, yeah, I probably wasn't going to get anywhere with it when I first
Yes,
watched it.
we forgot to talk about the. So eventually, it's revealed that, I mean, throughout the movie, they can never figure out where all of this money is, and they keep going through the guy's belongings, right? Charles' belongings to figure out where he left this money. They look into his bags, look into his cupboards, and so on. And there's eventually they realize that the stamps on a letter that was in his possession are worth a fortune. They're like three stamps which together um, make up $250,000. That's kind of the big revelation, and they have this realization because I mean they have this realization, and at the same time they're coincidentally outside the stamp market, which is where the climax is taking place.
You know,
And
that aha moment there.
yeah,
Like first they show Tex, he's walking through this thing and he's looking around and seeing these stamps. And they show this montage of these stamps spinning around and whatever. And he does this thing, right? He takes this cheroot that he's working, he goes, paf, kind of a thing, and then he turns around dramatically and runs off. And then Cary Grant follows him there, and he also has the same movement, you know, his stamps swirling all around him. And he also turns around and runs off in the same direction.
yeah,
That was so funny, dramatic. I thought, yes, I love this. The only
yeah.
thing better than this is Nicolas Cage dropping down on knees and going, no!
It was the bee. What? No, not the. What do they say? Not the bees. The the honey. They want the honey. Some nonsense like that.
Nicolas Cage has done this in so many movies. Oh, the only thing better than Nicolas Cage doing the drop down and no is Alfred Molina doing it in Spider-Man 2. Dr. Octopus, 8 arms going, no!
Yeah.
That was so hilarious. And I think I was the only person laughing in the theater when I saw that.
My puppy is here.
Oh, what's she
She was
called?
sleeping on this while. I'll be giving her lunch after this. So I
Okay.
think she's hungry. You want to see her?
Yeah. What's her name?
Jenny.
Ginny.
Yeah, like Ginny.
Ah, okay.
Okay, she's not in the mood to be carried.
That's all right. No worries.
Okay, so that concludes our discussion on charade. This was really fun. Before we conclude, we have a signature quiz round,
Lovely.
and of course, you will enjoy this because you're a quizzer. Everybody who's come on the podcast before this, almost everybody who's come on the podcast before this, has expressed a lot of apprehension about the quiz round. But
I'm apprehensive too.
I mean, if like as I tell everyone, if you're learning and if you're learning something, you're winning, right? So that's victory. So I have 5 questions for you since you had 5 reasons why you like this movie. Are you ready?
Yes, true.
Now, keep in mind that all of these questions are linked to this movie in some way. They're not all about the movie itself, but there's some link to the film in these questions. So that's a hint in case you don't know any of the answers. You can try and think about how this might be connected to this movie, and that might lead you down the right path.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, let's see. I hope these questions aren't too easy for you. That's my only fear. But hopefully, if you even if you get all five of them easily, at least many people in the audience will be learning this for the first time.
Okay.
Okay, question one. A Tunisian man named Hamida Jandoubi was convicted of the murder of a 21-year-old woman in Marseille in 1977. What makes his execution noteworthy? So he was sentenced to death. What makes his execution noteworthy?
I'm going to guess he was the last man to be guillotined.
Oh man, that's spot on, yeah.
You know, we forgot to talk about one of the characters, the policeman,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to get this. The first time I watched this movie, do you remember back when, I mean, I know you still watch WWE and all of that. You remember there was this guy called Paul Bearer who used to walk around behind the Undertaker with that urn? I thought that guy was that guy. I thought that was the actor when I first watched it. Right? So when I first watched it, right, this would have been like 95, 96. I was about 12 years old. We just gotten cable. And Charade was coming, and every Saturday's afternoon, I think there used to be a movie that used to come on Star Plus or something. The first week, there was a Bob Hope movie about boxing. And then the second week was this movie. I wanted to turn it off. My sis was insisting that we should watch this because Audrey Hepburn is a big favorite in my family. Roman Holiday, My Fair Lady. Oh, there's also My Fair Lady reference that comes in Charade, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But anyway, and I was like, no. But then in the first scene, a guy gets rolled off a train. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this now. And that's how I watched Charade for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. But the My Fair Lady reference, do you want to talk about that?
I can't remember it.
So in one of the scenes, when Cary Grant is dropping Audrey Hepburn off at the hotel, he opens the lift door and says, "Here we are." And she goes, "Where?" And he's like, "On the street where you live," which is a song from My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
And the strange thing here is that, and I looked this up, My Fair Lady was released in 1964 and was being shot in the late part of 63. This movie was released in 1963 December and was being filmed in the early part of 63.
Yeah.
And the rights for My Fair Lady, the movie, was acquired in end of 62. And that is when I'm guessing there was an overlap period at which it must have been decided that Audrey Hepburn is going to be playing Eliza Doolittle.
Yeah.
And so I thought the fact that he used a My Fair Lady joke in a 63 movie when My Fair Lady only came out with Audrey Hepburn in it in 64 was kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool, actually. I didn't pick up on that. Now that you mention it, it's true. I think Cary Grant at some point was offered the role for what's the name of the guy in My Fair Lady? Richard something?
No, Henry Higgins.
Henry Higgins, of course, yeah. I think he was offered that role. I was considered for that role, if I'm not mistaken.
But I can't imagine anybody else other than Rex Harrison playing it.
Yeah, of course. But I seem to remember reading that somewhere.
Yeah. Right.
First man to be guilty. You're quizzing me.
I'm sorry?
I said you're quizzing me. This is my quiz.
Sorry.
Okay.
I have the reins back to you.
No, that's a good one. But how did you figure out the guillotine thing?
I know that the last instance of the guillotines used was sometime in the 70s. And of course, there is that conversation where the policeman in Charade talks about how he thinks that when the guillotine comes down on a person's neck, it feels like a slight tickle, but he hopes that none of them have to find out. So that's why I connected it.
Okay, well done. I'm pretty sure you're going to get this next one. This is the one I'm most sure that you're going to know the answer to. I don't know about the others. I think the guarantees that I'm going to mess this one up. No, I'm pretty sure you'll get this because it's also on the Wikipedia page, which both of us read. Okay, so Charade had a premiere for charity in September 1963, but the wide release happened around Christmas that year. Now, between the initial charity premiere and the wide release, there was one line that was overdubbed. What was that line, or if you can explain what the reasoning was?
So yes, I do know this one. There's a scene in which they say we could be assassinated, and that was changed to we could be killed because Kennedy had just been assassinated about a month before, I think November 1963. And this was coming out in December 1963, so they overdubbed it. But apparently, because there are so many versions of this floating around, there are, well, I mean, I think the current versions that I saw also use the word assassinated.
Yeah, same. I think mine also had assassinated. Apparently, they changed it to eliminated. Like Audrey Hepburn says, we could be eliminated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 3. I think you'll get this one also. Since we're on the subject of Kennedy, there's a prominent figure who connects Audrey Hepburn and Jackie Kennedy. Although that figure's collaboration with Audrey Hepburn began with a case of mistaken identity. So, who is this person?
I know Hubert de Givenchy designed clothes for both Audrey Hepburn and Jackie Kennedy on acid.
That's the answer. Hubert de Givenchy is the answer. But do you know what the mistaken identity thing
I
was?
did not know about the mistaken identity, but I'm guessing she mistook him for somebody else.
No, he mistook her for somebody else.
Okay, all right, go on.
So the first movie that they collaborated on is a movie called Sabrina, which have you seen that one? Also,
I have seen the remake of it with Harrison
Harrison
Ford and was it Rebecca?
I
DeMarco?
haven't seen the remake. I've seen the original.
With-
You will like that one as well because
I'm
made
sure
by
I will because it's got Humphrey Bogart, one of my all-time favorite characters.
yeah. So Humphrey Bogart, Audrey Hepburn, and I think William Golding, if I'm not mistaken.
William Holden.
William Holden, sorry, yeah. And William Golding is the guy who wrote Lord of the Flies, isn't he?
Golding, that is.
I said Golding, yeah, instead of Holding.
Yeah.
So in the original Sabrina, I think 1953 or 52 was the first movie that Givenchy and Audrey Hepburn collaborated on. But he was contacted to do the costumes for Miss Hepburn, is what he was told. And he was expecting Katharine Hepburn, who was a bigger star at that point of time.
Right.
So then he at some point realized that, it's actually not Katharine Hepburn, it's Audrey Hepburn, so he was disappointed. But then obviously it turned out well for him in the end.
I think Audrey Hepburn oozed a lot more class than Katharine Hepburn did. Katharine Hepburn obviously had a presence.
Yeah, they're completely different kinds of actresses.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, question 4. I don't know. I think you might get this one also. So the last scene with the stamp expert guy, the philatelist, there's a scene where he's mentioning a whole bunch of stamps, which he gives the kid a whole bunch of stamps, right, in exchange for these 3 valuable stamps. And as he's rattling off the names of this whole bunch of stamps, there's one particular stamp that he mentions, which has a direct connection to an actress whom Cary Grant called his favorite leading lady. So which stamp is it, or who was his favorite leading lady?
He mentions Grace Kelly, I think in Coronation or some Coronation special, I think. And Cary Grant was with Grace Kelly in To Catch a Thief, I think, with Hitchcock.
Yeah, again,
a bunch of other movies also.
So he mentions a Princess Grace commemorative stamp. Commemorative stamp. Oh my God, let me say that again. I'm tripping up on this. Okay, he mentions a Princess Grace commemorative stamp. So you're right. And the Princess Grace is, of course, Grace Kelly, because she married the Prince of Monaco and then she became Princess Grace. So that's the connection. And Cary Grant called her his favorite leading lady. Mm-hmm. Okay. The last question is my only hope for stumping you. Okay, so this is the longest question. A patent for X was filed by an IBM employee called Alan Gordon Finlay, and was used sporadically before the Second World War. Finlay played an essential role in the design and development of this X, along with a guy called Edward Filene, who was an American businessman and philanthropist. Um, However, the Nuremberg trials of 1945 and 1946 are considered the official birth date of X, even though it was used sporadically before the Second World War. So, what is X?
The Nuremberg trials.
So, I'll repeat it in brief. So, X, a patent for X was filed by Alan Gordon Finley in collaboration with Edward Filene, and X was used sporadically before the Second World War. But the Nuremberg trials are considered the official start of, or official birth date or debut of X. And remember, it's connected to this movie in some way.
Microfilm, microfiche, one of those things.
No.
How
Should
about
I-
a hint?
You want a hint?
Yes, please.
Uh,
IBM and a businessman.
It's related to Audrey Hepburn's character in some way. Think about something that she does in this film that was also done during the Nuremberg trials. And by the way,
Oh, the simultaneous translation.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Good one.
Simultaneous interpretation is the answer. So
okay, you did stump me on that one.
Yeah. But you got it with the hint.
Yes, I did.
So that's it. That's the end of our conversation.
And a lot of fun it's been.
It's been a lot of fun. Before we conclude, do you want to just tell the audience where they can find your work if they want to follow you?
I have an Instagram account that I update very rarely. It's called Yellow Panel Cartoons. I'm sure we can include the link in the description, where you can see this deck of my cartoons, and also I have a novelty deck of cards called Pack of Lies. I've got that right here, which has a cartoon on each card. And if that's the sort of thing you or your audience would be into, do DM me and I can see how I can get it in your hands. It's for sale. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'll include a link to all of that in the notes. And before we sign off, I also want to say that, as usual, I'm looking to grow this channel. My puppy's kind of nibbling on my hand, so I'm distracted. But I'm looking to grow this channel. And it'd be great if you could like, share, subscribe, comment, do all of that. I'm looking to grow my subscribers because that's the next step to monetizing this. So if you, as well as your aliases like Brian, Alan, Carson, Alexander, and whatever other fake names you go by, if all of them could subscribe to this channel, that would be helpful. And thank you. Thank you, KNP, for being on this podcast.
Thanks, DL. It's been a great pleasure.